Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Ehlers, and I'm the Director of Outcomes and Training for Bierman ABA. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about one of my favorite topics, picky eaters. So we are going to talk about what are some potential causes of picky eating and what are some behavioral interventions you can try at home to get some variety going. Okay, so first a quick disclaimer. Eating and feeding is a pretty complex set of skills. And so there could be a lot of medical issues kind of surrounding picky eating and selective eating. So it's going to be essential to contact your child's physician first regarding any feeding concerns you might have. Potential medical conditions must be ruled out before beginning a behavioral feeding treatment. And so they can take a look at what sort of possible underlying medical conditions there might be that might be impactful. But if you are cleared to go, then there's lots of different behavioral treatments that you can try. Okay, so first, just some common issues you might be experiencing at home. So one would be just a general avoidance or refusal to try new foods. Anything that looks different or smells different just might be kind of a no-go. You might also be experiencing your child, sticking to the same small set of foods. They might have sort of their greatest hits, and that's all that they really want to eat, and they just want to kind of cycle through those. And then there might come a time where, they would get kind of sick of one or more of those foods. But if they're not adding new foods to their repertoire, then the amount of things they're eating will continue to get smaller. Another issue is brand, texture, or color dependent. And so, I might only want to eat Cheez-Its or only have, Chobani yogurt. And so that's, obviously really going to limit the amount of foods that your child can eat and things that they'll try. Another common one really for all kids sometimes is, lack of variety. Maybe a lack of trying like fruits or vegetables, things that maybe have a different texture or, aren't maybe as sweet or as, fun to eat. And then another one that's not really about the content of the food, but around the behaviors, during mealtime is, refusing to sit for meals, refusing to sit without a distractor or engaging in challenging behavior while at the table. So there can be lots of issues with just mealtime behaviors in addition to what your child is actually eating. Okay, and so these issues are going to result, in a bunch of different challenges for your family. One is creating separate meals, becoming that kind of short order cook where your child doesn't want to eat what everyone else is eating, and so now you're having to make a second whole meal for them. Or you can't go out for meals. Going out to restaurants is a challenge because your child will only eat a certain brand of French fry or only eat pasta prepared a certain way, and so they're not going to be able to be flexible enough to eat meals prepared differently at a restaurant. Another is just, going out in general, going to parties or, other family members' houses. You might have to especially prepare food or snacks to bring so you can feel confident that your child will actually be able to eat when they're there. And then also just, generally having nutritional deficits or, growth issues from not getting the certain, vitamins or nutrition that they need. All right, so there could be a lot of potential causes. Again, feeding and eating is pretty complex system in the body, and so there's a lot of things that kind of cause a kink in the system. And so, again, you always want to get those medical issues ruled out. It could be as simple as something like reflux when they were a baby can really kind of have some issues with their trajectory. And they might miss certain like eating milestones because of that. Food allergies can result in, gastrointestinal distress and discomfort. Also, vitamin deficiencies can result in like kind of strange eating patterns and things like that. So again, you always want to get those sorts of things ruled out first. And so say you have ruled out, any sort of underlying medical issue, there's a lot of other things that could be affecting your child that are the symptoms of autism that will affect them in their language development, their social interactions, but it also can have effects in this domain of eating. And so one is sensory defensiveness. If your child doesn't like the way certain, textures feel or sounds or, smells, this can also apply to food as well. And so new textures just might be uncomfortable to try. Smells can be a problem. Mixed textures too is also pretty strange. If you think about certain foods, so like say, yogurt, which is like more of a puree, but then you have some like crunchy like almond slices in it. Those are two wildly different textures that can feel very strange when you kind of like take a minute and think about it. And so that can be, a strange feeling for kids. Then they're not quite sure how to manage that kind of feeling. Another one is lack of generalization. So if your child needs lots of examples of, certain concepts to really kind of, hammer that down and learn that concept, the same might apply for food. So if they see a food, but it's in a new shape or slightly different color, to them, that might be a completely foreign item. They might have no idea what that food is. It might not seem familiar, or they just might not understand that that's still cheese. It's just a little bit different. And so you might need to kind of slowly work through those different changes to help them, build the whole concept of, what cheese or what bread could potentially look like. And then another one is, underdeveloped kind of motor skills. So, chewing is actually like pretty complex and it goes through different phases of development. Your tongue is actually pretty involved in eating as well. And so, having underdeveloped skills in these areas can really affect the way that you are able to manage food in your mouth and swallow and handle different textures and things like that. All right, so what do you do? How do you get started? So first again is you want to rule out, underlying medical issues. And then after that, you want to set up some consistent mealtime routines and expectations. Consistency is always key in kind of setting up those positive routines, and setting yourself up for success is going to be really helpful. And then you're also going to try some behavioral interventions to start to incorporate some new foods. I also want to mention that reaching out to speech and occupational therapists for help can be really beneficial to work on some of those fine motor and oral motor skills that I mentioned in terms of, eating, swallowing, managing food, also using utensils. All of that is stuff that speech and OTs are really great with and can help add to kind of the treatment team. Okay, so first up is good mealtime behaviors. So number one is you want to limit drive-by eating and snacking. So you want to set up only a few snack times per day and really avoid having things out or food that's easily accessible at any time. The reason for this is that it's going to be really hard for your child to be hungry at mealtime if they have access to food all the time and are able to like pick up on snacks whenever they need. Because they might want a snack like 20 minutes before dinner, and then by the time dinner rolls around, they're no longer hungry. And so they're not going to want to sit and eat because that's boring. They're not hungry, and they're going to be less likely to try new foods. The next one is you want to limit distractions at the table if possible. So if this is something that you already are using, you already have an iPad or just something to help keep your child at the table, that's totally fine. You have to kind of start where you are, and if that's what is successful right now, that's great. We'll just work on kind of limiting that as you go. So, maybe present the demand to sit down, say like, oh, I'll go with the iPad. Why don't you just take a bite first? And then over time you can, I'll get the iPad, and then really kind of stretch it out for like a minute or two before you get it and kind of work on fading it out that way. You also want to set up consistent meal times. And a lot of the literature talks about how you as the parent or the caregiver decide, when and what when it comes to eating, but your child decides how much. So this helps them kind of figure out how to follow their hunger signs and, eat when they're hungry and stop when they're not hungry. But you're the ones that decide, what are the appropriate meal times, and also what are they experiencing in terms of new foods. Another thing is you want to try to avoid making those separate meals after a refusal. So the problem here is that if they refuse and you make them a new meal, then they're getting reinforced for that refusal. They're getting a new meal right after it, and so they're going to keep refusing new and different things in the future because they know, well, I really just want this thing or that thing, and I'll get it if I just say I don't want this current meal. And so what you can try to do is just allow them to refuse, try to get them to continue to sit at the table as well, and then you'll have another one of those snack times kind of consistently set up in the day, and then you can provide them with like healthy kind of snacks at those times, and hopefully over time there might be less refusal. Another really good idea is to incorporate family style meals. And so, this is where you kind of put all the different foods in the middle of the table, and everyone takes portions onto their plate. And what can be great about this is that your child might not eat everything that is prepared, or maybe they won't even eat any of it, but they are tolerating a lot of things. They're tolerating the sight of these new foods. They're tolerating the smell. They're tolerating the proximity. Maybe they'll tolerate it even on their very own plate. And so you're slowly building up those tolerating skills, and they're getting more and more comfortable with new things. Another thing to keep in mind that I thought was really interesting from the literature is that it can take anywhere from 7 to 11 exposures to develop a preference for a new food. And so, I try to avoid saying like non-preferred foods, because really a lot of times it's not non-preferred, it's just unfamiliar. It's foods that kids haven't tried, or they've only tried a few times and they haven't really developed a preference for whether they like it or not. I can think of myself, I didn't always eat avocado, but I had it several times before I was like, oh, that's actually not so bad. And now I love avocado. So my advice is, just don't give up. If you offer it once or twice and it doesn't go well, that doesn't mean it won't be a food that eventually your child will come to really enjoy. Okay, how to incorporate new foods. So I have 5 categories here of like behavioral interventions that you can use to try to get some new foods involved. And so one is going to be to make it fun. I know it can be really stressful to try to it's really hard to get a kid to eat something that they just don't want to eat. And so trying to make it more fun and engaging can be helpful. Another one is to start small, and I mean literally small. Taking the food and cutting up into tiny pieces can really just help, make what we call response effort really small. And so eating a new food that's a tiny piece is going to be a lot easier than, like a whole fruit maybe. Another one is slow changes to texture, color, and shape. So again, if your kiddo has a hard time with generalization, you want to make some slow changes. We'll talk about that. Another one is to combine new and preferred foods. And then also our behavior analyst's favorite topic, reinforcement. All right, so making it fun. If your child likes dips, then you are in luck. You can use this as sort of a conduit to adding new foods. So if they like ketchup, barbecue sauce, ranch, you can use lots of new foods and incorporate the dips. So you can, take a pretzel rod, dip it in like hummus. And so even if maybe they don't eat the pretzel rod, they will, maybe touch the pretzel rod. They'll lick the hummus off the pretzel rod. And so they are, in fact, licking the pretzel. So you can slowly start to incorporate new things like that. Next up is playing with your food. And I know, kind of the thought is, it's not playtime, it's serious business, but if your child can handle it, and, not every child can, but kind of playing with your food and making it more fun and exciting can help just make the experience more enjoyable. and encourage them to try new things. And so you could have some examples, like take French toast sticks and have them like jump into a syrup swimming pool. And so, whether your child doesn't eat French toast or doesn't use syrup, you can still get them to touch and interact with those things by playing around with it. Or you can have your veggie straw as a mustache or a long nose or just something fun like that. Another good idea is to use finger foods or just cutting food into small pieces. This is going to allow your kid to be more independent and just more in control of what, not necessarily what they're eating, but like how they're pacing it and kind of when they take a bite and when they don't. So that can be really helpful to just give them a little bit more control and, let them not feel so pressured to take a bite exactly when you want them to take a bite. Another way to make it fun is different shapes. So cookie cutters can be great for this, especially if you have like peanut butter and jelly sandwich or, something soft like bread like that. Those can be really great for cookie cutters. One thing that I remember really loving as a child is different shaped pancakes. I remember like Mickey Mouse shaped pancakes or, heart for Valentine's Day. That always, I don't know, I just got a big kick out of that. As well as that food coloring. I still love to add food coloring to pancakes. So whether you just want to make, meal times more fun, to put on make different shapes and colors, or just getting your child able to tolerate slight variations to what they're used to, you can use food coloring. And then the last thing I want to recommend is that you eat with them and model good behaviors. So if they're seeing you, kind of avoid picking up certain foods or making kind of a face, or you don't like the smell of something, they might kind of repeat those behaviors. So you just want to maybe just pick foods that you like too, and kind of model those good behaviors for them. Okay, next is starting small. And so this picture is something that we've used at the center. And so you can see the pieces are pretty small, but this kiddo, could handle pieces that were, maybe like a little bigger than when I say cut them very small, I mean like even maybe half the size of what's in that picture. So some kids are going to need it very, very small, and that's totally fine. It reduces the effort to try something new. Like I would be much more likely to just try like a tiny piece of something as opposed to like a whole kind of like big bite. And so it reduces the effort. It makes it seem like it's just no big deal. It's so easy to get some progress going. It can also be really helpful for kids that gag due to smells. Some kids can be really sensitive to smell. And so just the smaller the bite, the less is going to have that kind of intense smell. And so you can set this up in two ways. You can have several pieces on a plate for them to choose from. So this gives them a little bit more control and just choice making ability. This picture of this plate is more what we were using, off to the side for the BT. We would then take like one or two pieces of each category and put it on a separate plate and give it to the client. I think this many pieces on a plate is going to be a little overwhelming. So I would recommend less pieces on a plate. You can also have, just one piece on a plate. If really you just need to start small, you need to start with just like one bite and then we can be all done. You can just, put one piece on a plate. That's totally fine too. All right, next up is slow changes. So this is going to be particularly helpful for those children who have difficulty with generalization. So the first change you can make is color. So, just buying some foods that naturally come in different colors. So, multicolored goldfish or, cheddar cheese can be white or yellow. Just kind of slowly incorporating different colors, changing it up. Or you can incorporate new food, but that's similar to color that they normally eat. So if your child really likes to eat like mostly beige food, so say like beige pasta, white bread, things like that, you can also start to incorporate other beige things like maybe dried apples. Shape is another good one. That's why I have this little dinosaur on the slide. There's certain foods that naturally come in different shapes. I think crackers are a great example. There's so many different shapes of crackers, the round Brits, a rectangle, I think rectangles are townhouse, square saltine. Another thing is packaging. And so some kids are going to get really stuck on packaging. They're going to know exactly what the package looks like that they're familiar with, and they're going to want to stick to that package. So you might want to just try, slightly different brands. But if that's too much, you're going to try an intermediate step, which is going to be putting the yogurt from the original container into just like a bowl, or like a plastic container with no branding on it, and get your child to tolerate it coming out of a new container. And then after that, you can start to incorporate new brands into that, that like neutral container, because some brands, yeah, are going to taste really different, and some brands aren't, though. And so your child might be able to tolerate those things that don't taste super different once they just get used to the fact that they might not necessarily know what brand or like what container they come from. And then the last thing is, different shapes that are fun. So that's why I have the dinosaur on here. So like dinosaur chicken nuggets, I think, are always a hit. And I think I've seen like Mickey eared shaped like veggie chips. Those are pretty cool too. Another thing that's often a problem for kids is texture. And so I talked a little bit before about mixed textures and how those can be hard to manage and just strange. And so you'll want to go slow with those too. So for example, if like mushy things are a problem, you'll start maybe with more solid foods and slowly move to a different texture. And so I have an example here about apple slices. So say your child likes apple slices, you can maybe then move to an apple crisp where the apple's cooked so it's softer, and then move to a completely different texture of applesauce. But they all sort of taste similar because they are apples, so they're the same thing. Just might have to be a little bit of a slow go. And then the last thing I want to touch on is liquids. You want to try something called wine fading with liquids. And that's where you slowly dilute the current drink that they have with something new. And so say you wanted to get your child to drink more water, and they really only like juice at this point. So you can start with a mixture of 10% water, 90% juice, get them to drink that for a few days, then move to 20% water, 80% juice, 40% water, 60% juice, and then just keep going until they're drinking 100% water and 0% juice. It's pretty cool. As long as you do it slow enough and you give them time to acclimate to the changes, this can be a really effective intervention. Okay, another one is combining new and preferred foods. So basically you're just taking something they really like and adding something a little bit new to it. So this can be cheese and crackers, or maybe throwing some little bits of fruit and yogurt. I know a lot of our kids like mac and cheese, and so if they're okay with different colors, seeing a little bit of green, I would recommend chopping really, really tiny bits of broccoli and starting to put that in some mac and cheese. Another really good one that I actually do for myself is add spinach to a smoothie. Spinach will get chopped up super fine and you won't even really taste that it's in there. I have spinach in my smoothie every day and I don't even know it's there. And then the last one is putting peanut butter on an apple. All right, and then our last intervention is going to be adding some reinforcement. And so depending on what you're working on or what the issue is, you can provide reinforcement for really anything that you need that you want to see, increase. And so this could be taking bites and swallowing new foods. I recommend trying to stick with taking a bite and also swallowing the item before providing reinforcement. It can depend, and your child best, but I do think it can be easy sometimes to get kind of stuck in a position where the child takes a bite, spits it out, and can never move past that phase into actually swallowing the food. And so if that's a problem, I'd really focus on starting with those tiny bites first. You can also reinforce any positive mealtime behaviors that you're seeing, even things that already occur, but that's great. You just want to keep reinforcing those and make sure they keep occurring in the future. And so that could be sitting for longer periods of time at the table, tolerating new foods, just sitting on their plate. They're not eating it, but it's sitting on the plate or on the table. Lack of sort of those challenging behaviors, throwing food, yelling about not liking something, always try to phrase it positively. So great quiet voice at the table. I love how you're trying new things. I love how you keep the food on your plate. Um, but reinforcing any of these is always good. And then if, we can't immediately start with taking bites of new food, then you want to work on all of those little skills that work up towards it. So smelling new foods, touching new foods, licking the food, anything like that, as long as they're making independent contact and they're kind of moving along and making progress, just keep reinforcing all of that. It's never going to hurt to reinforce those like little steps along the way. In terms of choosing a reinforcer, you want to start with something highly preferred. For a lot of our kids, eating new foods is very, very challenging. And so you want something really, really exciting to get them motivated to do a really hard thing. So you want to pick something that is like one of their most favorite, and you really need to limit access to it at all other times. It is not going to be effective if they know that there's 2 or 3 other ways that they can get this thing that you're offering. So it needs to be something super exciting, and it needs to be something that they can't really get at any other time. And it can be a toy or food. It really depends on what they like most. I found that even things like, one mini M&M can be really powerful. And so, you're going to start by reinforcing a lot of things. Then over time, you'll spread out the reinforcement a little bit. So it's not like they're eating, half M&Ms and half little bits of apple. You'll definitely be able to work on that ratio over time, but you got to get them engaged and motivated first. And then when to reinforce. So again, start easy. Start as easy as you possibly can because you want to keep them engaged, get them motivated. There's always time to make it harder, but you won't be able to make it harder if you can't get any success when you start. So start easy. I always recommend starting with just a single bite, reinforce a single bite. And you can do that several times, at one meal. It doesn't have to be just one bite and then you're done for the day. It might be for some kids, but other kids, once they're like, oh, well, I get this great thing for taking a bite, then yeah, I'll do it a few more times. And then over time, you'll just, what we call, you thin that schedule. So after a while, it won't be every bite. It'll be every other bite. It'll be every 3 bites. You'll make it harder as time goes along. And then you can also work on duration of time if you're thinking about those mealtime behaviors. So sitting at the table longer, tolerating the food being near them for longer, again, start small and slowly increase the time. Visual timers can be really helpful. If you just kind of Google visual timer, there's plenty of free ones on there that you can use, and that just really helps show kids, how long time is elapsing, how much time they have left. All right, so that is it for just a quick review of some interventions. If you're interested, I want to bring up this other resource that I think is really great. It's called Broccoli Bootcamp, Basic Training for Parents of Selective Eaters. It is written by 2 BCBAs, and it talks a lot about different strategies and different modifications you can make at home for, working on picky eating. I think it's really great and a pretty easy read, so I highly recommend it. And then if you need more help and you think you need maybe a more individualized plan or just need some feedback on like where to start, maybe some of these interventions seem interesting, but you're not sure exactly where to begin, just reach out to your BCBA and they can help you develop a more individualized plan. All right, thank you.